All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar today with eOne. Presenting today, we have Michelle and Tyler, so a huge thank you to them for being here today. But with that being said, I will hand things off to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Allie. Thanks for having us. So I'm really happy to talk to all of you today about Popdock for Microsoft Dynamics GP. I know a lot of you have been long-term Dynamics GP customers, and we're excited to show you the ability of Popdock to share information with those users outside of GP and report on data from applications other than GP. So today I have with me Tyler Epping. He is our Popdock product evangelist, and I'm not big on slideshows, so I think I'm going to hand it right over to Tyler so he can talk about Popdock. And just as a quick note, a lot of you probably recognize us. We were the makers of Smart List Builder, Smart View, Smart Post, and of course, Smart Connect. Smart Connect is for those instances when you need to move your data between applications. But today we're going to show you Popdock so you can share information.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Let me share my screen really quickly. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here today. We're going to kind of dive into our Popdock product and kind of highlight the benefits of being able to access your GP data outside of Dynamics GP. As Michelle had kind of mentioned here, we've kind of had a long history of working with Dynamics GP and Smart List. Obviously, we have our product Smart List Builder and Smart View. And Popdock's really the next generation of those two products, where we've taken our learnings of Smart List Builder and Smart List and have created a web interface to access your GP data, which allows you to not only bring that data outside of GP, but then from there, we can then share it inside of other applications or create a place for users that should not be spending their time in GP to access GP data. I'm just going to start inside of the interface here today, inside of our Popdock web application. As you can see, this is just the Popdock homepage. I'll point out that within the homepage, it's a kind of a configurable homepage where you can kind of create a dashboard in a sense of different reports that would, speak or pertain to you. I have a couple here listed, but this is totally customizable to any user. They can put whatever reports they want on this page. Our CEO uses this and kind of uses it as his interface for accessing his data rather than jumping into GP to get at it. But I'm actually going to jump into a list. I'm pulling up a Dynamics GP payables transactions smart list. So with Popdock, we have the ability to bring all of your smart lists outside of GP, and you can access it within this Popdock interface. This interface is very similar to some of the things that we've taken from Smart List and Smart View, but we've improved upon it and made it even easier to really work with your data. So things that you can do to any one of your smart lists within this Popdock interface is do things like add additional columns on the fly. Simply select which ones you want to bring into your list. Popdock will go requery and bring those additional fields in. We can do things like remove columns. Just as you can see, I selected a bunch of columns that didn't have any records. Obviously don't need them in my list. If I hit refresh, it just takes advantage of the full screen. We did things like being able to rearrange the order of the fields so that you have the fields in your list in the order that you want to see them. To do that, it's just a drag and drop feature. As you can see, I just dragged document date to the front of my list and it rearranges the order for me. We can also do things like group by any of the fields. So right now I'm grouping by my vendor ID. It's grouping all the payable transactions associated with this vendor ID. We then introduce subtotaling on some of those fields. And then you have the ability to drill into any of those vendors. Some nice things in being able to group and then get kind of subtotaling by your vendors or your customers, depending on what type of list that you're working with. Now, coming from GP and being in GP, I'm sure you're used to the 4 filter limit. With Popdock, that's something that we've completely eliminated. You can have as many filters as you want. You can hit that plus button as many times as you want to really get at and really specify what data you want to see. You can also do things like mix your ands and your ors, just to give you a lot of power and being able to ask questions of your data. Now, oftentimes with filtering, you're probably working around some sort of date field, filtering your list on some sort of date range. You'll notice that we give you a lot of different operators to work with. If you're working with a date field, you might be using this between, where you're filtering your list on, like I said, a date range. Obviously, that's something you can certainly do with Popdock, but we also give you some nice compare fields to work with. These are all just relative date. Maybe you wanted to just filter your list down on last week's transactions or or last month's transactions. These relative date filters are all off the current date. It allows you to just select one of these. That way you don't necessarily have to define a date range every single time, and nor do you have to change that date range if you wanted to access that list on a different day, which is pretty nice. Once you've applied filters, you can then save it. It'll save those filters and requery and refresh your list. From there, you have the ability to favorite. So this is very similar to Smart List Favorites. It'll save any filters that you've applied. It'll save any columns that you maybe have added or gotten rid of so that you can then go back and access that list at any time. You don't have to recreate it every single time you want to see it. And then from there, with those favorites, you can also share those across other people on your team so that they can access that favorite as well. Within this interface, exporting is very, very simple as well. You can see that we can export to both Excel and PDF. So if you prefer working with your data in Excel, you can see that it downloads that Excel file really fast. And once this populates here, you'll notice that we give you an Excel table that you can work with. It does bring over the subtotaling as well as the formulas for those. So if you prefer, like I said, working or spending your time in Excel, you can dump any one of your lists out very easily within that Popdock interface. One thing I will also bring up, which is just kind of an added bonus, we do have an Excel add-in for Popdock as well, or for Excel, I should say, our Popdock Excel add-in. What this allows you to do is you can connect by just logging into your Popdock account. Then any list that you as a user have access to, you can actually just populate it directly into Excel. You don't necessarily have to export it from Popdock or in another system. You can select which connector or your Dynamics GP connector and then which specific list you want to see, and it'll populate right into your Excel sheet right here, and you would have access to it. So just another nice thing for those that prefer spending their time in Excel and don't necessarily want to jump into an application in order to get at their lists. A couple other things just on this interface. You can see that I have this company drop-down menu. So all of our Popdock lists are going to be multi-company by default. If you do have multiple companies within your Dynamics GP environment, it's very easy to tie all those companies together for that list. When you do select the additional companies, a new company drop-down gets added. You'll notice that all this data is coming from my Fabricam company. These two other companies actually don't have any data in them, but if they did, you'll see that the company would just change in this field and it would show the associated records for that company. I'm going to go back to my last one. And then the next thing I want to introduce is what we call, if you're familiar with go-tos in Dynamics GP, details allow us to show related information all within the same screen. So I'm going to show you one example on this list, and then I'm going to jump over to another list where I've kind of brought in data from other systems as well. But you can see at the bottom here, I have this distributions detail. If I click on this and select one of my records, it's now showing me the distributions that are associated with this voucher number. So anytime there's some sort of relationship within the data, we have the ability to tie that data together and present it all within the same screen. That way you don't necessarily have to jump to multiple lists in order to get at the detail that you want to see. Now we can take that a step further, and to show that, I'm actually going to jump over to another list that I have here. This is just a customer's smart list that I have coming from my Dynamics GP environment. One thing you'll notice right away, I have some color coding in here. So with Popdock, you can apply some color coding to fields as well as maybe you want to display, customers that have a balance over $5,000 or as you can see, I've changed the color coding here based on their average days to pay, but just some additional functionality to really make your smart list sing. But going back to that details concept, you'll notice that I have a couple more on the outside of sales orders. If I select a record here, it's showing me the sales orders that are associated with this customer. I can also do a drill down into an entirely different list. If I right click, I have another detail presented. It's actually going to take me to a receivables transactions list that's filtered for this customer. So you can see this is just another way that we can kind of drill into another list if you want to take advantage of the full screen rather it being, a detail that's populated at the bottom of the interface. But on the side here, I've got a couple details coming from different systems. So we have the ability to connect disparate systems as details. Like I said, as long as there's some sort of relationship within the data and between the two systems, we can tie that all together. So I have a couple fun ones here. I'll click on this Maps one and select one of my customers. So I'm tossing in a Google Map API that's showing me the location for this customer. So this is coming from an entirely different system. A couple other ones I have, if you're working with like a CRM system, and I'll select select one that I know has some opportunities, but it's going to show me opportunities coming from my CRM that are associated with this customer. And in this case, what I'm using is I'm using this customer ID field in both Dynamics GP and then also in my CRM in order to link the two together. And then one more example is if you have maybe a help desk solution. Right now we are displaying ticket information. The help desk solution that we're connecting to in this case is Zendesk, but it's showing tickets that are associated with whatever customer that I've selected. So this is just one way where we can start connecting data from multiple applications and really bringing it all together into one interface, which certainly allows your users to have a kind of a better experience. They don't necessarily have to jump to multiple applications in order to get a view of the data that they need in order to partake in their job. So I like highlighting that interface. It's really easy to work with. We can access any one of your smart lists, which I'll show you in a little bit when we get into the back end. But we can bring all that data right into this Popdock interface, allowing you to access your GP data outside of GP in this web interface, then also being able to connect it to other systems. But I want to take this a step further. So everything I've shown you here is within our Popdock web application, but we're not limited to just displaying GP data inside of this application. We can actually bring the data to other applications that you and your users might be spending time in. So I'm actually going to jump out to CRM. Right now, I'm just on an account inside of CRM, Giordano's. And you'll notice that I have a couple of tabs here on this account. And I'm going to click on this ERP orders one. So this ERP orders list is actually a Popdock list that's pulling from our Dynamics GP environment, and it's showing us orders or invoices that are associated with the customer that I'm on. Now, a couple things to point out in this interface. Number one, we have this list filtered down, so it's only showing us records that are associated with the account that I'm displaying inside of CRM. We're making it contextual to that. If we were to jump over to any other account inside of CRM, this same Popdock list would be displayed of ERP orders, but again, only showing us the records that are associated with that customer. The other thing you'll notice is this doesn't necessarily feel like it's a foreign application. We've created the theme in order to make it feel like we're working inside of the system that we're in. So we have a theme applied here that's kind of goes along with Dynamics CRM's colors and kind of the scheme of what data looks like in here. But then from inside this interface, it's the same experience. Users can do things like add additional columns, they can remove columns, they can filter, they can refresh. So all that same experience I showed you inside of the Popdock web application would apply here, even when we're displaying the Popdock list inside of a completely different system. Now, this is a really powerful example that we like to point out because you probably have salespeople that rely on accessing Dynamics G data all the time. But those are the people that you probably don't want necessarily spending time inside of your accounting system. So this is a way where we can bring that Dynamics G data to the applications that they should be spending their time in, which is a CRM system. Now, I'm going to show you one other example. This one isn't coming from Dynamics GP. We're actually pulling in ticket information coming from a help desk solution. And the reason I want to pull this up is you'll notice with this list is coming from Zendesk. I showed you that example inside of Popdock as well. But with this one, there's the ability to also interact with the data. So depending on the application that we're accessing the data from, there's some actions that we potentially can take on the data to interact with the data in the system that we're querying it from. So if I were to right click, you'll notice that I have a couple of different actions available. So if I was a salesperson working inside a CRM, talking to my customer, and I had an update on the ticket, I can add a ticket comment. Or maybe I wanted to change the priority of the status of the ticket. If I go in and do this, we'll show you an example here. We'll change the priority to urgent. And if I refresh my list, you'll notice that that priority has changed in here. And that would also reflect inside of the system that we're querying it from. So this is, again, just a really helpful tool set, allowing your users who are spending time working, potentially this case with the customers that might be interacting with the ticket, allows them to kind of post any updates that they might have and send that back to the system that they're working or that we're querying it out of, so that the help desk team could interact and see any necessary updates. And then again, like I displayed earlier, although we're now displaying a list from a completely different, this is Zendesk tickets, the same functionality applies. Users have the ability to add columns. They can rearrange the order of the fields, the filters. So it's going to be the same exact experience no matter where we're querying the data from. The interface is going to remain the same in terms of what users can do with their data. I'm going to jump over one more example I have here is I actually have a GP projects list that I have embedded inside of Microsoft Teams. So this one's another fun example. Maybe you have teams that inside of your own Teams environment that need access to the same types of data. This is another great example of where we can embed a Popdock list. Really any place that it can accept some sort of iframe, we have the ability to bring a Popdock list directly into that environment. And then again, the big thing I'll just keep reiterating, it's the same experience, adding columns, filtering, no matter where we're displaying it. Users have got to have the same ability to really work with their data. So I'm going to jump back into the Popdock web application. And before I kind of get into the back end of everything and kind of what it looks like inside of a connector, I do want to show one other list. This is kind of taking your smart list to the next level. So what I'm about to show you is what we call a matrix report here in Popdock. And what a matrix report allows you to do is it allows you to do analysis comparisons like month to date or year to date or year over year by summarizing the data in columns as they relate to the rows. So you can see here I've taken a date field and essentially have broken it out by month for a year. And then I am summarizing the sales by customer for each of those months. So this is just another step forward. What I used as my base list was our customer smart list. And then from there, I was able to take it a step further and really give you a little more analysis into your data that you might not have initially with just using the regular GP list inside of GP. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. Everything that I've really focused on so far is kind of the end result. And how we're able to take your GP data and display it outside of GP and then also share it inside of other applications that you and your users may be working in. Now I'm going to just quickly highlight kind of the back end of everything, what it looks like when we set up a connector. So anytime that we are connecting to a data source, we set up a connector inside of Popdock. Just to show you, we have a wide variety of different connectors. We cover the whole Microsoft stack. So we're talking about Dynamics GP here today, but we aren't just limited to ERP systems. I've shown you, a CRM system. We can connect to other CRM systems, marketing automation platforms, help desk solutions. I do like to point out two generic ones as well. If you have data that's sitting on your SQL server that's outside of your GP environment that you would like to report on, we can connect to a regular SQL server and bring that data in and give you access to it inside of this web application or embedded inside of other solutions. The other one I like to bring up is this REST service connector. If you do have additional applications that we don't have a pre-built connector for, Popdock has the potential of being able to connect to those using our REST connector as long as there's some sort of REST API that we can work with. But yeah, this is just to show kind of a range of different applications that we can connect to and that we can combine alongside Dynamics G data, whether that's combining it in a list or showing it as details within an interface. But I'm going to dive into my Dynamics GP connector specifically. And basically what I want to highlight in here is just really how easy it is to work with. Inside of one of these connectors, it's really entirely customizable to you. You have a lot of flexibility, and inside of it, you're really ever working with drop-down menus and fields with cursors over them. You're just making choices in order to select how you want to present and what data you want to access. So I'm going to click on lists. So when you set up your Dynamics GP connector out of the box, we bring in all of the standard smart lists immediately available to access directly inside of Popdock. But you also have the ability to add additional lists. If you've built any lists with Smart List Builder, or if you've built any lists with Smart List Designer, just by checking a box, we can add those lists directly into the environment, hit add. From there, immediately available to use inside of Popdock. I will also point out that we can also connect to the SQL tables and views for your Dynamics database. That is another option if you want to bring in those as lists into your Popdock environment. Now, anything inside of one of these lists, really customizable as well. You can go in here, it'll show you all of the fields. If you wanted to change the name of the fields, it's working with a field with a cursor. Maybe you want to change the field type or maybe change a summary method. You have that full functionality inside of this interface. If there are some additional calculated fields you want to bring in, very easy to work with inside of Popdock. I'm going to jump down here to custom lists. Custom list is kind of a virtual SQL in a sense, but this is what we use generally when we're combining data from maybe multiple systems. You can see that we have a couple of different custom list types. I showed you a matrix report, kind of what that looks like on the end. Merge lists, we see this commonly with maybe merging together, data from a historical system alongside data from a current system. Join lists. I have an example here of one where I've combined GP data and CRM opportunity info and created an entirely new list. And really what you're doing inside of here, you're just making choices. You're selecting what list you want to combine together. So you can see I picked my customers list coming from my GP environment. I then select what fields I want to bring into my new list. And then am joining my two lists together and saying what field am I joining by. You'll also notice that then I have my opportunities list coming from a CRM system. And again, same experience, just selecting what fields. Once you've created this list, this new list is automatically available inside of Popdock to access, and you can then use it and display it where you want to see it. So I covered being able to bring in, like I said, all of your smart lists right away, being able to bring in any smart list builder lists, any smart list designer lists, but I'll take that a step further because we can also import any of your smart list favorites. We have two ways of doing that. You can either import by favorite. By doing that, it'll show all of the favorites inside of your environment. You can then select which ones you want to import, and then you have the ability to really assign it as well. So you can assign the smart list favorite to either a team or a specific user inside of Popdock. The other option would be importing by. This would then pull from your D users, and then again, it's going to pull in all of the favorites that user created, and then you would again just assign it who gets access to that inside of Popdock. So you can select any of your teams. You can also select if you want to just assign them to a specific user. So we give you the ability to, like I said, access any smart list that you've created, whether that's a smart list builder list, your standard smart list, or your smart list favorites. We have the ability to bring any of those lists into Popdock, and then from there it's just a matter of deciding where do you want to see it. Do you want to work with those lists inside of the Popdock web application, or should we jump out to one of those external systems, maybe displaying it inside of GP or a Teams channel? You have the flexibility in determining what the best route is and what people need to see that data and really bringing that data to them. The last thing that I'm just going to quickly highlight here today is what we call widgets. So when I showed you inside of CRM embedding that list, that GP ERP invoices or orders list inside of CRM, what we created inside of Popdock was called a widget. So I'm going to jump over to that section really quickly, and just to show you what the experience looks like to create a widget. It's very easy to do. So I'm just going to give this one a quick name, test. We have a bunch of different widget types. The ones that I've showed you in both Teams and in CRM, those are called single list widgets, where I'm just displaying a single list. You're then selecting from what environment do you want to pull this list from. So if I wanted to pull a Dynamics G list, I would select that connector. I then would select the default company. And then if you have that list assigned to a group inside of Popdock, similar to the series that you would experience, and you would select, let's say I wanted to just select my sales group and my sales line items list. In terms of selecting what list you want to display, it's really easy to work with. You're just working with drop-down menus. The next step would just be placing your fields. With your fields, if you don't select any fields, it's just going to pull the default fields for that list, but you can also just customize that and select which specific fields you want to bring in. And then the last piece to make that contextual is just adding in CRM, we added a parameter to say, associate this customer number inside of Dynamics GP with the customer number field. If you do want to make it contextual, this is where you would go to place that parameter. On the opposite side of that, if you just want to make your list more general, you don't necessarily have to place a parameter. But then from there, depending on the system, we would just go to our embed codes, grab the link, and then it would be a matter of just embedding it inside of whatever system we want to see it. So that was a lot. I kind of went through hit home on a bunch of different topics here today. I guess the big thing, just to kind of reiterate, is how easy it is to really connect to all of your smart lists, any smart list builder lists, any of your smart list favorites, and pull that data outside of GP, making it available through our Popdock interface. And then from there, it's deciding where do you want to see it and who should have access to it, and then giving that access and allowing your users to have that interface to really get to the detail and get to the data they need to execute their jobs. those are the main things I wanted to highlight here today. Michelle, if there's anything that you wanted to add.
I don't think so, Tyler. That was a great presentation. Allie, did you have any questions?
We did not have any questions, but I did want to say you did a great job presenting, Tyler. Once again, thank you guys so much for being here. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.